right, 5 past the big hour of 5 o'clock here in Amsterdam. I am here with Michael Cote. Michael, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Barton. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to see you. So you're at VMware, aren't you?
I am, yes. I work at VMware by way of Pivotal.
And you're doing a bang-up job there.
Thank you.
If we look at your career, you also used to work at 451. So
yes.
You were an analyst. You also were at Red Monk a long time ago.
BMC Software.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then also this company called Dell, where I'm at right now.
That's right. I was just telling someone about our long relationship starting at Sun when I was at Red Monk. And,
yes, indeed.
And then we worked at Dell. It was great.
That's
Good
right.
times.
You were a key member of the Sputnik team. In fact, the one who convinced me that I could pitch it and then maybe make it work. And that was something that I never thought would happen. But here we are.
Yeah. Is it like 10 years later?
Oh, yeah. No, it was 10 in November.
I was just going over that with one of my coworkers, just kind of going over the tale of it. And and then I realized I think that was like 10 years ago. And that's amazing. There's like this, they're still shipping it.
No, I seriously thought that at the 3-year mark, I had gotten email from some VP saying, hey, we're rationalizing all our laptops. And so I thought, well, that's it. We've had a good run. And but somehow we came up on top, 9 lives, something like that.
There was a lot of latitude for it.
Yes. No, it was an XPS 13. Inside joke for those of you who buy Dell clients.
I knew you would have a lot more precision with that.
Yes. I always find you very inspiring. Okay. Oh, okay. So why don't let's power store that, and then
I've got an idea for we opened up with the radio thing. You should be FM Power Edge.
FM Power Edge.
The Edge.
Yeah, that's right. It's the Edge. That was Led Zeppelin off their House is the Holy album. We've got some cars coming up for you next, but first, a message from our sponsor.
A whole rack of compute.
Thank you. Alrighty. So we're here to talk about platform, and I'm not talking about shoes. This is a word that's come up recently. Well, actually, I shouldn't say recently. There's been a renaissance of the word because, of course, when we first started out in the cloud space, and in fact, this is true. I remember, this is how long ago it was, you put out a tweet saying something to the effect of, okay, I guess this is how it's being defined, or something where you had IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS.
Oh,
yes. It was because in the beginning...
This is a long time ago.
I mean, a long time ago, and you had recognized that that's the way it's going to be. That's going to be whatever divided. So anyway, so we have PaaS, which stands for Platform as a Service.
Yeah.
And then when you got to places like Cloud Foundry, then it became, what did they call them? And as well as OpenShift, call them Cloud Native.
Well, those were Platform as a Service, basically. But
it's rebranded to sort of give it.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it like a cloud native platform, or cloud native was the word that we all used back then. And I think we still would say platform, basically, because there was a...
You're saying now for Tanzu or for what? Or anything
back in the Cloud Foundry days. Like,
right.
There was still, back then...
and so for those people who probably don't know what Cloud Foundry is...
I'm sure everyone does. Come on. There's a booth right over there. You can go visit with them. Check out. Well, so Cloud Foundry was actually started, as we would say in the M&A business, organically.
Yes.
In VMware.
And gardeners say that.
Yeah,
too.
there's a great, who is that guy Cade Metz? There's a great Cade Metz story, if you want to look that up, that goes over it. And they, I guess I should say we, but I wasn't there at the time. The VMware people hired several people from Google, and also James Waters, who was at Sun at some point.
Yep.
And they essentially, their mission was to do a platform as a service that would, I think it started off as a public cloud service. And this was in 2010 or 2011.
Pivotal was created to put together a bunch of pieces.
Right. So to get to that point, so Cloud Foundry is just open source based platform as a service that started off as Pivotal Web Services, PWS, or as the kids like to say, PDubs. I guess they're not kids now. They're probably, in their middle ages.
Yeah, nobody says that.
PDubs on FM Power Edge.
That's right.
But and so it was an open source based platform. And so what happened is I forget. I should know when this is, or I shouldn't. Who you can look it up. But VMware had acquired, EMC had acquired a company called Pivotal Labs, which was like They had been around.
Meese.
That's right. They had been around since I think the late '90s, and they practiced extreme programming on the power edge, and and so they were a consultancy, kind of like ThoughtWorks, but on kind of in a different way, and they would do pair programming and things like that. And so EMC had purchased them, I presume, because they liked the work they were doing.
So wait, so take that back, wind it back in
Sure.
there. I remember this is when we were talking about Project Sputnik, which is
Yes.
a developer laptop that we worked on 10 years ago and still around. We had two other ideas that were going to really make it special. One
Right.
was the cloud launcher, which we had real tough time doing, and we gave up. And luckily, Docker came along, and that space did what we were trying to do. The
Right,
other
right.
one is what I remember you saying Pivotal did,
That's
which is
true.
now come up in actually tonight's sponsor for the booth crawl. Oh gosh, their name, Cloud Development Environments is what they do.
Okay, cool.
So
I have no bones to throw, Barton.
So you're familiar with Cloud Development Environments?
I love them,
Yeah. Only on Tuesdays. So,
but they're far superior to dirt developer environments.
So anyway, but that seems to be what you were talking about. Pivotal did,
Right.
right?
Okay. So that was
Now
a
you know
whole
what I'm
other
talking
thing. There was I forget the name of the person because I never knew it. But being a consultancy, it was an open source project at some point. But the Pivotal Labs people had developed, and this must have been in 2009 maybe. But they had developed a way to basically set up your desktop environment that a developer could use because. The Pivotal Labs way of doing stuff is they do pair programming and pair designing, they pair product management. And so no one person like has their own machine, you just kind of rotate to different machines. And then also if you're rotating to different consultancy engagements, it would take them a long time to set up their desktop. So
Right.
they had like kind of an automation system, I think it was based on Chef, that basically they could check in what they wanted a desktop to look like. And then it would configure it for a developer. So that meant that it was easy and faster for them to go from project to project. And
Or
also,
if you,
like,
I remember you saying new hires, right? So
Exactly.
when you come in, you don't
Onboarding.
have to, yeah, you just that's the one the kids use.
yes.
But yeah, so that's now coming to the fore through these cloud development environments.
That is true. That like if you look at the Backstage, very popular developer focused thing around here.
Spotify.
Yes, exactly. So if you watch the kind of or hear the origin story of Backstage, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gone and had drinks with men and be like, did that really happen? But the
It's the lore that surrounds it.
I mean, can you imagine that I would even do that? Like, I would never.
You would.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Anyhow. So part of I think the primary metric that they used and probably still do to measure like Backstage effectiveness is onboarding. And it might be different now, but they were very interested in it takes a long time for developers to just get started, right? And then that went into all the other Backstage stuff like project and API discoverability, and blah 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 blah. But to the point of what you're talking about, I think they still use this metric that they measure the usability or whatever of the developer's onboarding by how long it takes them to make 3 commits or PRs. I stopped coding in 2005, so I don't know what I know about Subversion.
Yeah,
but not.
And that was Fortran.
Do they call it GOT? I got my code.
I think it's get out of here. Anyway, see what I did there?
Yes,
Go
that's
on.
good. But yeah, I mean, I think that project, it probably doesn't exist anymore in Pivotal Labs. It was based on that idea of onboarding, right? And that kind of general area. Since I used to be an application developer, that's something that I'm always interested in. Is I just want to make developers. I don't want to, but I appreciate other people who want to make developers' lives easier and speed things up and.
Well, you want
that.
to, but you can't. So you want to enable
Yes.
people to enable them to help them
I'm
be
very.
all that they can
If
be.
you wanted to make a slide with 4 boxes all the same side and lined up, I'm your guy for that.
Yes.
But as far as doing a pull request, I don't really know what that is.
Right.
I'm pretty handy with Markdown, but not
and
other stuff.
PowerPoint, right? You can
PowerPoint.
point the power wherever you want
Yeah,
to.
and so with Cloud Foundry, Cloud Foundry was also, or I shouldn't say is, because it's used by many people who, it's fun when you go, fun for me, when you go talk with Cloud Foundry people and you're like, hey, are you interested in this Kubernetes thing? And they're like, you need to leave right now. Because they very much so, and they've used it for a while, and it's
Which when you're saying they've had Cloud Foundry for a while, or they've been having troubles with Kubernetes?
No. I mean, they've used Kubernetes. I'm sorry, they've used Cloud Foundry for many years, and it works out well for them, right? And so when I look out at we're here on the floor, as you can hear in the background, at the Kubernetes world, it's really encouraging to see them I think they're doing a pretty good job kind of going towards that platform thing. And they seem to be very cognizant of the maturity models and going through those stages, and that developers are important. You remember the OpenStack days. And again,
yes.
OpenStack is still around.
Yeah.
But I think I've been trying to think about this week that I think one of the or the OpenStack community, I'm trying to be nice. The OpenStack community declined in its being the future, right? OpenStack,
it's the Roman Empire, right? It grew and grew and took over everything, went up to Scotland, and then all of a sudden receded.
That's right. You got the old Hemingway thing. How do you go bankrupt? Very slowly, then all of a sudden. And
was that Hemingway? I think that was, wasn't that Churchill?
Probably.
Ascribe everything to Churchill whenever there's a doubt.
If you haven't seen that Hemingway documentary, you should check that out, because that'll
pop up.
It's very informative. Yeah. I think you're thinking Barbra Streisand. But anyhow, so I think at one point the OpenStack community was exactly like this. I think you were even telling me the height of conference attendees they had was 7,000 or 8,000. And we have
in Austin. So I was
10,000 here.
I was at the first one, which wasn't open to the public. It was Dell, Rackspace, and NASA.
Right.
And there were 70 people at the Omni Hotel. The last one I went to in Austin was 7,000.
Yeah.
So how many X is that? Do the math.
And I think, obviously everyone's trying to do everything, right? But I don't think that they latched on to the application developer thing quite soon enough, or tenaciously, or something, right? And I remember this is when I was at 451, kind of, not that I'm some big fancy whatever, but I and many other analysts were saying what's the application developer story? And they were starting up. This must have been in 2014, 2015, kind of a group to look at that. And I think in the Kubernetes area, they've been a lot quicker to be application developers better make their life easy, right? You've got the inclusion of Backstage and all sorts of other things that are very focused on application developers rather than infrastructure people.
So that brings us full circle, right? I was asking about platforms because that's what we're here to talk about today. That's the latest thing you're trumpeting and trying to sell.
Oh, trumpeting.
Yeah. No, you're not selling anything. And if you did, I wouldn't buy it. But anyway, so you've got the idea of the platform. And as what we're saying is that platform as a service has been part of the nomenclature for a while.
Yes.
But now we're talking about platform engineering, and there's people in the DevOps space who are saying, well, no, it's just you're rebranding it, it's marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But is that a bad thing? I think one of the things that's plagued DevOps, you hear from a lot of people, is just the lack of definition,
yes.
common definition, so that you're talking about the same thing. When I say DevOps, do you mean the same thing? And also I think it's a bit esoteric, right? You don't buy DevOps; it's a methodology.
They're very fast to tell you that you can't buy a DevOps.
Well, exactly, and it's a cultural, it's clams, right? As John Willis would say.
Yeah.
A culture, lean, automation, measurement, and sharing.
I think calms is what they say. Although you're reminding me that when they came up with that, I was like, come on. Why not clams?
Yeah, well, no, exactly. Just
you have, let's see if I remember, you have culture, automation, lean, learning, and
learning.
Monitoring. And then some people would add on...
Was it measurement?
No, I think it's probably monitoring. And then people would add an S onto it to make it calms. And I don't remember what the S...
I think John added the extra
sense.
S. So I was wrong about the lean part.
One doesn't eat just one clam.
No,
you
no
want
one
clams.
doesn't. And you don't want them sitting out too long because that's... Anyway, so we're back to platform. So what is different now when we talk about platform engineering? How is that different from what we call DevOps? We'll start with that, and then we'll wrap in Kubernetes from there.
Right. So, well, whatever. I could disclaim till the ponies escape the barn.
Yes,
the cows come home.
The cows, yeah.
Which have you seen you probably haven't, but this country is huge into cows.
I move that.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Dad joke alert.
We're gonna have to go to a station break after that one. Anyhow,
I'll be right back.
Yeah, so I think my current analysis, and like, I will do one disclaimer that, like, as I said, I make slides nowadays. Like, I'm always more interested in hearing what people who actually do this, like, have to say about it.
But you're talking to a lot of customers, right?
Right. Now, yeah, sure. Now, all of that disclaiming aside, like, I think, and I observed this when, I was at Pivotal, and the way that people use Cloud Foundry or the Tanzu application service. And I've also observed this when we talk with customers, we have another, basically a platform we build on top of Kubernetes called the Tanzu application platform. And when you look at both of those and you talk with people who are using this infrastructure, right? What they are interested in is they want to make sure that we have this infrastructure, and we want our application developers to be able to, like, basically deploy their applications as quickly as possible. And then also, back to your onboarding thing, there's a type of onboarding which is they need to be able to get their developer environment, right? They need to be able to just, like, get a place to run their stuff. So
Get
yeah, there you go.
DevOps.
Yeah, you're trying to subvert my train of thought.
Oh.
But anyways,
Are you speaking code?
yeah, whoa, that one was, we can keep going. So I think what's emerged, to get back to your original question, is so if you look at DevOps, and again, I don't know, I should talk with, like, like Schaefer and John.
Andrew Clay Schaefer, for those of you who don't know, the one who originally had that conversation with Patrick Dubois.
Sure. We all know the stories.
Some do and some don't.
Yeah,
I tell mine differently.
Patrick and Chris and, like, all, also John Willis, all these other people. But I think you kind of described it. I think what happened with DevOps is it really did begin with the A in Calm Clams, which was automation, right? So I mean, you were there and I was there, and you saw DevOps evolve out of basically Chef and Puppet and Ansible and Salt and CF Engine, and you're like, yes, right?
CF Engine, wow, that takes me back. So just one thing, and this is something that Patrick says, Mr. Dubois, the godfather of DevOps, and I don't know if it's his wording or if he got it from somewhere else, but this is that idea of technical gravity. So just like you brought up Puppet and Chef and CF Engine and Salt, we talk about DevOps as a cultural movement, as a methodology, but people like to, the technical gravity pulls them back to tools, and they want to be able to say, DevOps, oh, that's Chef and Puppet. And then from there we went to DevOps, oh yeah, that's Docker. And then now, guess what it is? It's the Kube at the con. So Kubernetes, for those who didn't catch that.
So to fill in your pretty good timeline there, I think you had Chef and Puppet and all the other ones, right? And in the meantime, then you had monitoring and observability, basically the entire tool chain that someone would use to make sure their infrastructure and their applications were up and running, largely in, like, a cloud environment, right? Like, this is like in the, I don't know, it depends on how you count it, like 2010, 2011, like this time. So, like, public cloud was a big deal, but, like, it wasn't quite what it is nowadays. And, like, who knows, right?
Well, I mean, if you remember back to when we had Sputnik, which is 10 years, this developer laptop, we called it the cloud launcher platform, or the cloud developer cloud platform. So it definitely was in the minds of folks that you're going to write stuff that will go to the cloud.
That's right. And so so all of these different tools and technologies kind of attach themselves to DevOps, because DevOps was like, I know a bunch of, like, IT service management and ITIL people, and they're great people. They have good intentions, but for whatever reason, like, DevOps became kind of like the place where doing operations and IT management was evolving. Like, a lot of the attention was there, and that's where all the new ideas were. And so, I don't know the exact date, but what happened a little bit after that first era of DevOps is, because it was like, we're going to, like, make operations better and we're going to help people out, people started paying attention to, like, the quality of life and the quality of work that people were doing. Because operations people, sysadmins, as we used to say, they're not known for being the happiest people, right? And, they get called up when things go wrong. And, it's very rare that someone goes up to an operations person who's like, I just want to say thanks for everything running well, and then they leave, right? So, and it's kind of a rough lifestyle and job. And so the DevOps people, I think they came in and they were like, well, I don't know if they actually were like this, but what ended up happening is they like fixed that. And, you can't fix everything, but they essentially started bringing in practices from other disciplines to essentially improve the way that like operations people did work. And then we entered like the culture era of DevOps, right? Where, once Puppet started putting out the DevOps report, and then a few years into that, I forget when like the Nicole and her people came in, but then all of a sudden there's this Westrum thing, the four or five columns of a type of culture that you have.
Westrum?
Yeah, I think it's Westrum, right? WSTRUM.
Please say what that is.
And it was
Just pretend I don't know. What is that?
Oh, sure. And it was basically a way of diagnosing or identifying the type of corporate culture you had. Now, Barton, I'm going to let you guess the good ones and the bad ones. It starts on the left. And you have pathological. What do you think that one might be desirable?
Well, paths are good to follow, and logic is good. So you want to follow the logical path. So I'm going to say that's a good one.
Thumbs up. And then you had, I think, bureaucratic is the next one.
Well, bureaus are where you store your clothes. You always need to have places for storage. That's another good one.
And then there's like a third one. I'm maybe there's only three. And then there's basically
tyranny.
It's called like growth or like learning. I mean, essentially, the Western thing is like not good. People are mean, and they blame people, and it's like a very like
life is British,
like
short.
80s Wall Street movie type of situation. Mm-hmm. And then the middle one is like, because it's bureaucratic, it's basically like systems have been set up to run things in one specific way, and there's a lot of process around changing it. And so it's actually like fine, but it's not like innovative or changing. And then of course, whatever the third category is, growth or learning is.
Okay, now that's the good one. That's the one I want.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
It's what we would want, what we would expect, like in a good environment, right? And I'm giving a lot of short like descriptions of this stuff. So this is like the cultural era of DevOps. I'm going to come to your question at some point. And
Can you wake me up when you do?
That's right. And also around this time you had the observability era of DevOps, where there was so much data and logs and stuff that the observability people came in. They were like, we can't just like look at all the logs and look at all the red and the green lights. Like, we need some sense making out of this instead.
Would this be the Splunks of the world, or who would be?
Well, Splunk was Splunk was in there, but it's sort of like your honeycombs and like.
Oh, I thought we're way back in the. Have they been around that long?
Yeah, they have been around for a while. And so like,
I knew that.
like the observability thing, I think kind of happened a little after the cultural part.
Okay.
And then at that point, like, I go to a fair amount of DevOps days, and most of the DevOps stuff nowadays is really focused on the culture stuff. They'll talk about like, whatever the most recent cloud stuff is. But I think what happened to the platform engineering thing is, maybe a couple of years ago, I'd really have to like write this down to get it precise, but whatever. Let's use some squishy numbers here. But like a couple of years ago, like Kubernetes, like was on the cusp of like winning. I know some of the Kubernetes people are like, it's not really about winning. It's about, but what happened is that they won mind share, right?
So it's over Mesos.
Yeah, over Mesos, Docker Swarm, like whatever the data center of the future was, like something, I forget what that was.
DCOS? That's the
something
data
like
center OS?
Yeah, it's DQPI. I forget what it is.
Okay.
But it was the maybe that was the Mesos one. I forget, but there's a few of them running around there. And then, of course, there was also Cloud Foundry and OpenShift, right, which were their own platform as a service thing. So, and definitely nowadays, when I go talk with people, like executives, they'll say, almost word for word, Kubernetes is the future. So that's what we're doing, right? And that's what their strategic, thing over the next few years to do. Hence, 10,000 people here, right?
Yep.
So I think, meanwhile, in the DevOps community, for whatever reason, they didn't it actually was the safe thing, but they didn't latch on to the Kubernetes world, right? Like they kind of just,
this is the
DevOps community. Like they talked about it, but it's not like it became a big thing, like observability and a big thing like culture or automation. It wasn't integral to it. It was just a thing. And so what ended up happening there is then, in addition to that, like if you go to a DevOps days, it's mostly an ops days. Like there's actually not that many application developers.
No, so here I'm going to challenge you on that. So
Sure.
I was talking to Karthik, who's has been one of the founders of DevOps Days Austin. He's actually going to be passing the mantle on to Laura and a couple other folks. But he had a word cloud of how many people showed up, and it was pretty much 50-50 application and,
that's cool.
and operations.
I could see that. I don't know the demographics, but like, every time I would see talks, and it's great to reply to actual data with not data.
Yes.
But in general, when I'd see the talks, there wouldn't be like how to do Java programming, or like here's a good framework. So like I think they could have paid more attention to application developers, right? Because it's right there in the name. Like that could have been done a lot more. You have to help me out with my sentences here.
Yeah, I'm just letting you go.
And so and then the last two things I think that happened is, so Kubernetes like wins out mind share. Everyone wants to roll out Kubernetes. So about 2 years ago, everyone shifts their attention to that. Like they want to stand up their Kubernetes cluster. They want to get it there.
And some sooner than others, because I think Red Hat, I remember, and it might have been at the very first KubeCon, which I was at a million years ago in San Francisco, where we had about 500 folks. They went and they made the decision, I'll say early on, to get rid of all their homegrown proprietary type stuff they had done, and they had their own container version, their own orchestration, and they switched over to Docker and Kubernetes.
Yeah. When OpenShift shifted.
Yes,
and that's covered very well in the excellent 2-part Kubernetes documentary, the original one. I mean, it actually is really good because you see like, I don't know if you've seen it, but I would recommend it. You see the Google people talking, and then all of a sudden it's just like the Red Hat person shows up. And then I forget I should know his name being in the industry, but like the Red Hat person is like, yeah, we had to make a decision at some point, just as you said. And like, we decided to go for it, that this was like going to be the way to do things. So that was kind of the tipping point, and that's the vendor side for things. However, what I meant was more of the end users, right? The actual, like over there's a bunch of Mercedes people. They have everything because they're Mercedes-Benz, but they also have, they've been doing Kubernetes for about 5 years. They also have been doing Cloud Foundry for like 7 years or so, if I remember. But they've built up multiple platforms. And so now when I go talk with people, I think by far the majority is even too small of a word, of workloads of applications are not on Kubernetes. But again, the sentiment, the plans for most people are to run stuff on Kubernetes, right? So there's been enough of it, the diffusion of innovation, where you've got the early adopters, and then there's this curve that goes out into a long tail. You might know the Gartner hype cycle.
Yes.
Picture the hype cycle.
Well, the early adopters, the blah blah blah, and then
the mainstream adoption, and then the trough of disillusionment, and then the plateau of productivity, and
the fast followers, right? And then I forget the laggards.
And so like any smooth curve, it's not a perfect way of representing this, but I think Kubernetes started coming to this point where the application developers were like, this is a lot of work, and indeed. You can rewind the Twitter timeline and see where the Kubernetes people started coming out and saying like, whoa, this is not for application developers, right? There's multiple famous tweets from Kelsey Hightower. And one of them is like, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms, right? And then also, Craig McLucky, one of the Kubernetes people, he used to work for us, or whatever.
So he went from Google, and then he
had his own company, Heptio, and then VMware acquired Heptio, and then whatever. There's a bunch of big tech company stuff.
Yeah.
But he was speaking at one of our conferences, and he was like, "Oh, hey, sorry about that, developers. Like, we never really intended for you to like mess with all this YAML and things like that." Which
and I know that was a not miscommunication. I didn't get that in the beginning, right? I thought that, in fact, I was talking to somebody back when from Heptio. I forget the gentleman's name, but anyway, I was talking about it being for developers. No, this is for operations.
I think I just looked this up the other day because we just released our State of Kubernetes 2023 report, which is now available. If you search for VMware Tanzu State of Kubernetes 2023, you can easily get it.
We're for all fine purveyors of technical documents.
I love some charts. It's a survey.
Okay.
So I went and looked up, and Stephen O'Grady, he had a post in 2019 or 2018 that was basically like the Kubernetes has one post. And he ended it with kind of his like, as ever, the developers have been the kingmakers, right? And so there was very much, I don't know if the Kubernetes people had this sentiment, but what was happening out there is, following the Red Monk, the O'Grady hypothesis, theory, whatever.
Finish it and I'll tell you.
That the developers did sort of like propel Kubernetes into success, right? Like, I mean, you could imagine if developers didn't like Kubernetes, it probably wouldn't have worked out well, right? I mean,
did they
it's kind
like
of tautological.
Kubernetes or they liked what it delivered, right? Is the whole
I
idea
think
to be not transparent, not visible to them.
I mean, to go back to the diffusion of innovations, the crossing the chasm, the Gartner hype cycle, it's all the same chart theory. You have this very like 1 to 3% of the potential user base. These early people who are just very interested in it, and they're like the most vocal, and they push it along, and you win over those people, and then you go to the early
Fast
majority,
followers,
right?
yeah.
Like you kind of climb up this curve. It looks like a bell curve, but then it goes into
it's an
a line.
asymmetric bell curve.
Whoa!
Yeah,
Thank you. Anyways, so I think that group of developers, like the Mercedes people, they were very interested in it, right?
And they're a special group of Mercedes. She was on stage. It's like the innovation lab part.
Yeah,
it's not just the general.
I don't
IT
know which
folks.
ones are. I don't know, but sure. And so I think there were legitimate developers who were interested in that. There was also lots of operations people and not application developers. But what started happening is, as you go through that curve and you get to the late majority or whatever it's called, and the laggards, terrible name,
yes.
but like we could call them the normal people
Yes.
who aren't weird. Like I think the developers there discover like I'm not interested in this. This is a lot of work, and I've got to do development. So this is where platform engineering enters the picture, also with some other stuff going on. And I think this is kind of what I'm getting at with I don't know if I'm doing like revisionist thinking or whatever, but I don't think the DevOps community hopped onto this, like saw and hopped onto this and was like, oh, we should solve this. We should make Kubernetes more usable for mainstream application developers, right? Like we've got to polish off the edges because, the type of people who would speak at a DevOps days and kind of like the core people, they would be interested in the challenge of getting Kubernetes up and running, right? I mean, the initial famous thing was literally called Kubernetes the hard way, right? Which is sort of like the easy way would be cool too.
That's right.
Which that existed. I'm being kind of flippant to kind of like narrate this point here, but so platform engineering, I think, came around largely to start solving that problem. Right.
Well, so if we stop there, platform engineering, how would you define that? Because what my understanding is, it's something that has been there. It's just refocusing it's part of the DevOps, but it's not part of the culture, but it is a central center of gravity for this. And yet the tenets or the key parts of it have always been there.
Yeah. So I don't
mean that disparagingly, because some people say, oh, it's always there. It's just marketing. And I think I think
platform engineering is an evolution of DevOps. Now, again, we keep disclaiming stuff, but like that's one way of describing it, right? It's sort of like we were looking over some cookies that my one of my daughter's Girl Scout troop was going over, and they had like oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, and I was telling my wife Kim, just like why mess with it, right? Just chocolate chip cookie. You don't just like.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's perfect. Don't mess with it. However, every now and then, people come up with a new type of cookie, and maybe one day the oatmeal chocolate chip cookies will be. It's not that it's anti-chocolate chip cookie. It's an evolution of it, right? And it kind of builds on that and adds one little thing. And similarly, I think with platform engineering, there's kind of two starts of it. It sounds like I'm never going to end, right? But
it's okay. I'm reading a book over here.
Yeah, that's why I have a mildly famous podcast in the tech world.
That's right.
But I think what happened is, so one way that platform engineering started was we should solve this Kubernetes usability problem by building a platform, by going, and this is where things get fuzzy because...
But that's a part. Isn't there always been a platform? That's how we started out, as platform as a service.
I mean, you always end up with an accidental platform if you don't have a purposeful platform, right? And so what is a platform in this context? Well, it's pretty much what a platform as a service is, except no one likes saying platform as a service. And what's a platform as a service? Well, you've got infrastructure, and then you have a whole bunch of like integrated middleware. And then you also have, depending on, this is where platform engineering, after I say this, like evolves stuff, is you also have a way of packaging and configuring and deploying your applications to this platform, right? So, you know, your build tools, and this is where DevOps is very much in this, like you type in some command and it figures out how to deploy your application to all your zones and your clusters and set up your load balancers and yeah, all that great stuff. Again, I make slides, right?
Yes.
So
and I look at them.
The platform has that middleware integrated in their databases, like event queues, like even sort of like, as we used to say, opinions of architectures. So it helps you do microservices and APIs, like all this stuff, kind of like a Java application server, if you remember those. Mm-hmm. And it also like integrates with the infrastructure. So that's largely what a platform is. It's like what the developers interact with. And so that's the one of the first things that platform engineers started looking at. I think, again, I haven't verified all of this. And they built on top of like a lot of the goals and the technology and definitely the culture of DevOps. I mean, I think that's like maybe best is hard to say, but like one of the most important effects of DevOps was to bring the cultural aspects in, which, again, to be flippant to summarize, is like, what if being in operations wasn't terrible, right? Like, what if we structured the organization and the way that we think to make it a actually good environment? And that persists in everything, whether it's...
And how do you get rid of that impedance mismatch between developers and operations who say, it worked on my laptop and...
Right,
leave me alone.
And you know, so this starts to get us maybe to me stopping to talk here, but like DevOps also brought in another notion that persists to this day, and hopefully everyone thinks about it. But in platform engineering, they do, which is paying attention to the end-to-end process, the value stream, the pipeline, everything that it takes for like someone thinking about some code to getting that code, having someone use that code, right? Like if, let's say you have your bill pay application and someone thinks like, oh, we should auto-complete the zip code for bill paying. Like everything it would take from me saying that to someone actually using it, right? And DevOps was like, one of the great realizations DevOps had both for developers and operations people was that like, that whole process is your product. Like you are responsible for that whole process, not just your one little silo, as they would say. So anyways, so platform engineers also took that on. And this is meanwhile, while like Backstage and I think maybe like Humanitech and Ambassador Labs, like a few other people around here, they were developing an internal developer portal. And Atlassian also had something here, but it was basically like, this is coming from a whole different area that eventually merges here. And it was essentially like, what are the collaboration and the project management tools that developers use? And I think like Atlassian and like GitHub and, you know, GitLab had kind of like dominated this space for a long time, right? Like if you go talk to an application developer, they could probably tell you 15 jokes about Jira and Confluence and like, you know, things like that, because they're delightful people. But so there was, in the same way that like platform engineering was evolving DevOps, these new people were coming in and thinking like, what if we like to have a new approach to the portals, hence the word portal, the intranet that developers use, right? And meanwhile, Spotify releases Backstage, which kind of codifies the problem set that you're doing. And the problem set there is, I would call it, I mean, it starts with discoverability, right? So the canonical, no
you were
pun
right
intended,
next to the canonical booth, yeah.
The sort of the prime mover thing.
Wow, that's your philosophy.
Yes.
Is there an umlaut on top of There is, isn't there?
Probably. It seems very Norse, right? Like
yes.
there's some tree of suffering involved. Anyways, what's that called? The Life Tree? I forget.
That was a movie with Brad Pitt.
I mean, I think basically if you're Vikings and you're going towards a large tree, turn around the other way.
Yeah.
Go back to England.
Yes.
Anyways.
Quickly.
Yes. So what they were thinking is that back to the Backstage thing, that when we get a new developer on, again, the onboarding thing, we have, I forget how many thousands of little tiny services. And if a developer needs to go and find, I don't know, the song rating service, how would they even do that, right? Like there's no Google. right? Like, and intranet search is always terrible. And then there might be different wiki pages and Confluence pages, or just some markdown files and some Git repository. But what they wanted to do with internal developer portals is start standardizing what that looks like. So if you look at, like, nowadays, if you look at an internal developer portal and at a Backstage Influence thing, what it's doing is standardizing that for developers, right? That's sort of how I would look things up, and like what the expectations and the culture of publishing things are. It allows you to find the team that owns a product. So back to the banking example, you could say, like, all right, so we've got the bill pay team, and there's some team that is in charge of looking up addresses, and
Data.
So instead of having to re-implement that all over
Potato.
again, like, what if we could just find that team and use their service? And you can imagine at a big bank with 25,000 developers, you don't, right? Like, there's no Google to go to search for this stuff. So, and then there's all sorts of other things that gets dragged in for a developer like suite. And then that kind of, the IDP thing kind of merges with these other people trying to figure out Kubernetes for developers.
IDP, I was just actually reading one of your blogs and
Yes.
I saw that and I hadn't heard of it. It was internal development platform, right?
Internal developer portal. So close, Barton.
Shoot.
Yes. There's actually a great Gartner overview, which you can get for free at tanzu.vmware.com, or if you go to cote.io/platform.
Do you know that IDP is not a acronym, but is an initialism?
Yes. Very good, Barton. That is like, wow. I appreciate. I was an English minor.
I was an English major, so
I lost-
I trumps you.
Okay, well, I only needed 1 credit to get an English major, and as all adults will do, right? I was like, what was I thinking? But, like, I don't know why. I was just sick of it. I had taken a Victorian literature class the year before, and I was just like, I survived. I mean, I like Thomas Carlyle and a few of them, but I was doing the Victorian literature.
William Congreve, Carlyle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Sartorus, like all sorts of things.
Tamburlaine. Now we're talking about
Yes.
Marlowe. But I mean, one of my favorite courses was Elizabethan and Jacobean drama.
Oh, that would have sent. I would have quit college.
Those things were
But
great.
I was reading that Victorian literature, and I was like, what am I doing here? I mean, I love the professor. He, like, heavily influenced the way that I research and study things and, like, take notes on them. But, like,
and it's a way to think too, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a way to analyze.
And that's why that class was salvaged, because it was Professor Newton, and he was almost
I don't
like
give a fig about Professor.
he like applied. I don't know if he realized this, but he applied an engineering mindset to close reading and literature. It was very engineering driven. Anyways, so I decided, like, I don't want to go to the last seminar where you sit around with a bunch of people, like, and they talk about, what they've read, and it's like, I'm almost done with philosophy. I'm back to that because it's philosophy, no problem, right? But I should have taken that last seminar. But kind of like in the Kubernetes world, they were like, we got to finish this off, right? Like, so they actually came in. So I think that didn't work out, Barton. Can you edit that out?
Okay, so then we came from, I guess how we got there was because we were talking about the difference between initialism and an acronym, and IDP is an initialism, and that's where I asked you for our audience to...
Now, pop quiz, anachronistic. What does that mean?
That means something that's... So an anachronist is they have people on movie sets. So
Yes.
if you're a samurai drama and they have a certain katana that wasn't... It takes place in 1880, but that didn't come till 1885.
Yeah.
Then that would be anachronistic.
Right.
Acorn meaning acorn from an oak tree. Chronos meaning from the chromosome.
Sure. Yeah. You got it. Well, you at least avoided my. I love that word because it means something out of time.
Right.
Not that it's forward or
No, you're
backward.
thinking of
It's just in its
asynchronous.
wrong time.
You're thinking of asynchronous.
Oh
not
yes. Sorry.
anachronous.
I love it. I love anachronistic.
Yes.
That's good.
Well, the other one is my favorite is penultimate.
Oh,
because
penultimate.
so many people misuse that.
Yes,
They
yes.
mean that to be the uber ultimate when
Yes.
it is indeed the second. To
Well,
last.
if he's listening, shout out to my old friend Zane Rockenbaugh. He got obsessed with that word, and I want to say 9th or 10th grade. And so everyone who knew Zane at the time, they know exactly what penultimate means. That was like his penultimate was his thing. I don't know what his number one thing was, but that was definitely what he liked.
Serendipity, because I know when we drive the kids to school, I would teach them certain words, and so penultimate, serendipity. I can't remember. You need a few to put in your tool chest to whip out when your back's against the wall
Yeah.
linguistically.
Yes.
IDP.
I think the IDP people and the make Kubernetes developer friendly. Over the past year and a half or so, they've kind of merged together. Because what you find
is what you call it from Spotify, is that a
Backstage.
Is that an IDP?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an IDP framework,
But it's not for developers, right? It's for the rank and file, isn't
well, no. So nowadays, Backstage is just like a framework for making portals, internal portals, and it has a plugin architecture for like doing, as we used to call it back in the Sundays, portlets.
Oh my gosh.
Which are like little tiny parts of your page. I mean, it's in the same way that Kubernetes seeks to heavily standardize how you interact with infrastructure. So Kubernetes, like, people talk about APIs. It's a lot of things, but the really great thing that it does, in my view, is it says, instead of having 50 different proprietary and open ways of representing and managing infrastructure, let's have one, right? And let's have the one API and the one architecture to do things with, which is great. So in that same way, you had all these developer collaboration tools and portals, and they all have different APIs and different. What's the word for like? There's some fancy.
Anachronistic.
Yes, there's a fancy designer word for this, but the same human factors.
Okay.
Like like sometimes when I go look at a project page, their idea of an owner is a group. I mean, different vocabulary, different jargon. Whereas what Backstage kind of does is it standardizes all of that jargon and that thinking, and also the APIs and the plugin architecture, so that now, just like with Kubernetes at the infrastructure level, there's a standard that you can use if you want. So you can do whatever you want with Backstage. It's just a framework. However,
so just to interject, then
Yes.
Chris Anazik,
nice,
the
very good.
CTO,
Have you been practicing that?
And I can, you know what? I can even spell that. So it's ANISZCZYK.
Wow.
Because one thing he was explaining, because it's a Polish name, and so you've got that ZCZ that is common to a lot of the names, and that for me, it just is like a dyslexic nightmare, because I never remember ZCZ until he actually said it, and then it all came together. So anyway, he did a list of 10 things to watch in 2023, and Backstage was one of them. And I was talking to him about it, and one of the things, if I'm remembering correctly, is unlike Kubernetes, which is the hard way, right? It's not easy to do, and it's usually, well, at least it started out being people at the bleeding edge. Backstage is something that's used by sort of the rank and file type of enterprises. Sure. You don't have to be a tech company using it. It's actually used by a lot of...
And to be fair to Kubernetes, like, I've got two sides on my mouth, so I should talk out of both of them.
Yes.
But to be fair, to Kubernetes, like, it's a much more complicated thing to solve. Like our buddy Andrew Schaefer, he used to use this in referring to Pivotal Cloud Foundry. He would say, like, yeah, I mean, if you want to run a cloud, it's not simple, right? And similarly, like, if you want to run Kubernetes, which is running a cloud, it's like, it's not easy, right? Like, it takes, to use the old Mark Pilgrim thing, like, a lot of effort went into making this effortless, right? And so...
Simple is hard, right?
Right.
To make something that is easy for people to deal with, there's a lot and that's what we're trying to do, right?
And so Backstage is, well, being an application person, I would say it's kind of equally important, but it solves a simpler problem, right? Like, its problem set is a lot more simple, so it is easier to get used. Now, it does run on Kubernetes, last I checked. And that's also why it's such a big platform engineering thing, is it's like a Kubernetes native thing. I don't think you can really run it off of Kubernetes, though. I'm sure it's just computers, right?
But so that would be an example, even though it's easier, something that's abstracted for the end user. In other words, it's something they can just go ahead and do, and they don't have to be, there's not a lot of fiddling or whatever. It's invisible to them under the covers. It's just sort of what they do. Kind of like a TV. You just sort of turn it on and it works.
Well, speaking of what they do, I'm realizing, Barton, that I'm late to another recording with my friends ITQ. However, I'm not as late as I was coming to this podcast. I'm supposed to be there right now instead of 15 minutes ago.
Yes, so I get the extra. Tell them you're on your way, but you're not really.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do the countdown clock. We'll try and stick the landing here.
Okay.
So we talked about cloud engineering. How would you sort of wrap it up in a bow if you were to take it and talk about it in a simple way for people who are not who are new to this space, or for those who say, well, we've always been talking about platform engineering, and why engineering? Why is it just not talking about the platform?
Oh, I mean, that's just the word people. I mean, engineering is building something out, and also it kind of implies running it. I mean,
it can be a verb or a noun, right? It's the group.
Yeah.
People are platform engineers, and that's
and I think it is building that platform for your organization, right? So it's not just an off-the-shelf thing, but it's customizing it to how you do development. And finally, I think the big thing with platform engineering that comes from a lot of the work we and other people did back in the PaaS days at Cloud Foundry, we had this phrase, platform as a product, which meant when you build this...
your blog too, and I was thinking, what the heck's that?
When you build this platform, right? And this kind of comes from like DevOps thinking, but more from Agile thinking, is we treat the developers as our customers, and therefore we product manage it. And in the same way, you used to work at a consumer packaged goods company.
Johnson & Johnson. You don't have to floss them all, just the ones you want to keep.
And in the same way that, like, your customers, and you're always, they don't call it product managers, but, you have someone who's thinking about how can I build up this product, this toothpaste or whatever, how do I find the problems people have and, like, work on perfecting it and changing it around so that it's useful to the customers.
Extend the lines and things like that.
Right. And so that's
transparent, right?
I think that's the big shift with platform engineering is that I it's not super widely. It's only in the last few months that they've kind of taken on that platform as a product thing. Although, I don't know, this is April, so I lose track of time. Maybe it's actually been more than a few months. But they're starting to think about, it's a product we're building, so we need to product manage it instead of just deliver a service to someone, right? We need to talk with the developers, like DevOps stuff, but also come up with ways to help them and solve their problems, just like us vendors. Like when we were doing Dell Sputnik, we were like, what are the problems our customers, the developers have, and how can we build a product that will help them out?
And so in this respect, they're building a product to be used by the developers. So the developer doesn't need to know how the car works, how it's fuel injected or not. They just need something to deal with their midlife crisis, or take the kids to soccer. Or
I see. You're not talking about platform engineering.
No. I'm drawing an analogy now, right? So that's all they care about, but that's sort of been the promise, as I understand it, of platforms from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is there then any more uniformity to what operations does? We've got the tool chain, right, that most people use, and we've got the infinity loop, and that's sort of pretty much decided on in one way or the other. Have things gotten any more beyond that uniform for operations?
I'm kind of hopeful that in the next couple of years things will get better. I mean, we're kind of restarting over, back to philosophy. Maybe this is in part 2 when we discuss. I have this is more of a coping mechanism I developed recently, but I have this theory of the eternal reoccurrence of DevOps or platforms where, if you go back to 2007 and you look at Heroku, and before that you had the J2EE, the Java application platform. And then you had the PaaS stuff, the Cloud Foundry stuff. And now we have platforms in the Kubernetes world. And as we get older, in your 30s as you are, Bart.
Yes,
like,
late 30s,
you may not appreciate this.
Yeah.
But, like, it is upsetting to, like, have to reinvent this stuff, but I think it's good, like, because each time, as long as we get a little bit better,
it's iterating, right? That's what it's all about.
And so
iteration.
So I think hopefully in the next couple of years, as we're reinventing this platform again, what I have started to try to do is I just want to tell people, like, here's what worked last time, right? Like, here's what didn't work and what worked, and let's do that this time, right? So that to cite him again, as I think the way that Schaefer would put it is, like, let's make better mistakes. Let's fail better this time.
Fail fast, fail better.
I butchered that up, but
get input.
It's been great talking with you, Bart.
The pleasure is mine. All right, that has been Michael Cote here on W.
Can I do a little plug for myself?
Yes,
I've got a great newsletter, if I don't say so myself.
I was looking at to prep for this.
I've written up a lot of this kind of theory of mine. But if you go to
Dutch name, what was the thing that you on it, like Cote's whatever?
Oh, that's German, Wunderkammer, or just Wunderkammer to say it in American. But if you go to newsletter.cote.io, I write up all sorts of stuff like this at newsletter.cote.io.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. It's helpful. I know people who actually read it and take it seriously.
If you go there now, I think I've got a pretty good post that's about kind of a more darker or cynical take on what I was just saying, that, like, we had a distraction for a while, and now we can get back to application developers. But with that, We'll talk again soon. See, sorry. I have my own podcast, so I'm doing hosting there.
That's right. Hey, whoa. All right. That was Michael Cote here at KubeCon. We like to say good night, God bless, and until tomorrow, we'll see you.
Good talking, Bart.